This is Season 3, Episode 5 of my modular journey. And today we're looking at the Music Thing Modular Radio Music module. That's a lot of modules and modulars. The Music Thing Modular Radio Music module, I finally found one on Reverb around the middle of August of 2022. It cost used $149. I'm not sure how much it cost brand new, but I think this is only available now as a DIY project. I think you can buy the parts from Thonk or something, Tonk, however you say it, and build your own. So I had been eyeballing this module since late 2021 because of its very interesting approach to audio playback. I was intrigued first by its opening line in its documentation. Radio music is a virtual radio module. Oh my God, my arms are falling down. The docs further state, it was designed to be a source of unexpected audio, not a looper, which sounds great to me. I watched a few videos on radio music, including a DIY that got me all excited about building my own modules someday. And I really like the concept behind this module as far as how it works. Saw one on sale on Reverb, so I nabbed it. True story. When I first plugged it in and loaded up the default sound banks, I was mesmerized by what was coming out of it. The first thing I heard come out of this was what sounded like an old weather forecast, broadcast like in the Wayback Days, that would just play on a loop over the air to a radio. There are many beautiful 1930s, 1940s lo-fi audio broadcast examples in the default sound banks. I think they come from archive.org. Regardless of audio content specifically, what intrigued me the most was the concept. You pick one of 16 banks, and then on each bank has any number of stations, and how these are organized on the SD card is there are 16 folders, which are the banks. Inside each folder are audio files, up to 48. We'll talk about that in a sec. When you select a bank and then start turning the station knob, the module scrubs through the list of files in the bank and plays back the audio. The station can also be selected via CV by sending a precise voltage to the module to tune into the station. One note about files real quick. The doc says you can put up to 48 files in each folder, but warns that putting that many makes it difficult to select a station. Because if you think about it, here's your knob to select your station. At the lowest, it's station 0. At the highest, it would be station 48. So that means you're trying to pick 48 slices out of this potentiometer. I found that putting 8 audio files inside one bank is enough for me. So let's look at the interface real quick. The interface is this station. Let's see, can I get close to this? I'm having some trouble with lighting. Let me move my light real quick. This is a complete faux pas. I'm not supposed to be moving lighting in the middle of shooting, but let's take a look here. All right, we need to be able to see this guy. So let's look at the interface real quick. The station knob, this is an audio file selector, if you will. For any of us old enough to recall radio, turning this knob is chock full of nostalgia, especially if the audio files are old school radio music from our parents' or grandparents' day, pre-television. Anyone remember War of the Worlds? This knob's sensitivity is reliant on how many files you jam into the bank folder. If you're struggling to find your sound, just reduce the number of files that are in the folder, and it'll make it easier to select. The start knob is where to start in the audio file. Say you have 8 files on bank 1, and each one is 5 minutes of audio. You can tune to audio file 3, and then you can start to whatever position. If you want to start, maybe there's a thunderclap at 2 minutes and 30 seconds, so you'd think that would be midway, right? A start can help you jump directly to this position in the audio file. Note that start position only works when you press the reset button. So in other words, when you do find the start position you want, you then have to tap reset to actually start there. There's also a note in the docs that says the start is a course control with a resolution of 512 steps. So if you have a 30-minute radio show, the smallest shift you can make will be around 3.5 seconds. I'm not sure I see a problem here. Reset is exactly what it sounds like. It resets the playback to the beginning or to wherever start is set in the file. Reset also doubles as a bank selector. If you hold it for 200 milliseconds, it will change the bank. And there are 16 banks. And they show up here on the top. I forgot to talk about these. These 4 LEDs up at the top are there to not only be a VU meter of the playback of the audio, but it'll also help you see what bank you have selected. Each of the above features has a CV input for ultimate automated control. Sending precise voltages to these CV jacks can pick a station, set a start point, or reset audio playback. A use case of this would be using a sequencer to trigger audio precisely. And the last item on the panel is the out jack, which is a mono output. Flipping this guy around, you can see here is again another little teensy board with the USB-C adapter here. I guess this is for updating the firmware. Oh, here's power right here. That's a power jack. And then here is another micro SD card. Crazy. And of course you use the micro SD card to load audio files into your folders, which we'll talk about now. Oh, thank God I could put my arms down. Let's talk about the SD card. This is what I've discovered about the SD card for radio music. There is a settings.txt file. This seems to be a place to do all kinds of fancy things. See a link in the description for the documentation for more details, because I haven't messed with this much yet. I'm going to mention something about the audio packs real quick. The default one that comes with the module, but I think it's just the default pack, is pretty fun. It's got a lot of interesting things in it. Like I said, it was very mesmerizing for me because I'm old and I love the nostalgia. But I did try a couple other recommended audio packs, and how do I say this? I'm not one to get offended or easily shocked by anything, but the audio files in something called Answer Phone were shockingly offensive and disturbing, including what sounded like answering machine messages from a man harassing his ex-wife or girlfriend. It was very uncomfortable to listen to. There's also some weird packs with some silly drunk people being stupid, which I have no idea why this content is considered usable, so I just reloaded the default audio pack for radio music, and I tend to enjoy that. I will, of course, be putting my own audio on this guy eventually, but I'm a little disturbed by the recommended audio packs in this package. So let's talk about audio formats. The docs state that the files should be mono 44.1 kilohertz, 16 bits, headerless WAV files with a .raw suffix. Although, in 2017, the firmware no longer has this last requirement. WAV files can be used, and 8.3 naming convention is no longer a requirement after the 2017 firmware. There's a free software tool for converting files to radio music format, link in the description. And as of the 2017 firmware, a few changes have been made. The WAV file extension is now supported, no need to convert. It's still 44K by 16-bit mono. RAW files are interpreted as 44K 16-bit mono. There's in that settings.txt file, any audio files equals 1 will allow reading both mono and stereo WAV files. Mono files up to 96 kilohertz by 24 bits. But that seems a little excessive and limited. By the way, what good is reading a stereo WAV file if the output is still only mono? I'm sure there's some sonic reason why that makes sense. There's a few more changes in the 2017 software you can find in the description below. I don't need to go into every detail in this video, but I wanted to mention a few meaningful changes now that I plan to use the module. So why did I choose radio music? This is not just another audio looper, as I've stated above. It is very specific what it does, and it's pretty small, inexpensive, and can be a DIY project if you have steady hands. I love this concept, especially the old archive.org radio broadcast samples, because I'm old and I miss the golden age of radio. I do have other audio playback devices, but radio music is truly a one-of-a-kind in its nature, and the module can be reprogrammed with additional firmware packages to change its functionality entirely. As far as how I plan to use it, I want to map out what voltages are necessary to change stations and set start points. I plan to use the module mostly as background chatter or noise in patches. So at this point, let me get this in the rack while you go feed the cat. All right, we have a radio music by Music Thing Modular in the rack. And yes, once again, this is 3 months later because, again, in editing, I realized I left the camera out of focus for the entire film, so you couldn't see shit that I was doing. So I'm once again refilming the demo portion of this episode. This will teach me to stop being in a big hurry to record things and just take your time and do it right. What I want to demonstrate here is the station and the start position and the reset button, and then of course selecting banks by holding the reset button. So to start with, let's listen to the first. I'm going to get some volume. As I said earlier, I think I said earlier, the folders on the SD card here are 16 different folders with a number of WAV files or audio files in each one of those folders. And as you turn this knob up here, you scrub through that folder because the folder being selected is the bank that you're currently set on. So let me show this real quick. If I hold this for 200 milliseconds, we go to 2. That's folder 2. There's 3, 4. I'm going to put a link in the description to point to what these LEDs are actually doing, because it's almost like a little mystery encoder ring to figure out what these dots actually line up to. So that's probably 16. So there we are. We are back to bank 1, and now the audio file that's playing is this oldies thing from the 40s, 30s or 40s.
I'm only 70 years old, but I had friends 50 million years ago.
And if you tap this reset button, it just starts the WAV file over. You can then dial this up a little bit and start it partially the way through the WAV file.
On behalf of Mrs. Harry Houdini, I wish to thank all members. This is a personal gathering aiding Mrs. Houdini.
A recent scientific
So you can see
New York ever saw.
You can see how this kind of sounds like a radio station, right?
Is titled The Blonde Jean Connie Philadelphia.
Customers for you. Yes, that's right. Nearly every listener has driven in to a Rio.
Thanks to the mobile gas man for the Tiger broadcast.
So the reason for showing all that is this is, again, bank 1. That's all we're going to do today. And then this start position has, it's a long WAV file in there that has a number of audio clips all stitched together, I'm assuming. I've never taken them apart, so I don't know. But what I want to show is how I plan to use this device, and that is by sending precise voltages into the station or the start position, and then playing a very specific piece of audio. And how I'm going to do that is I'm just going to take out of our beautiful ornament and crime here, with hemispheres loaded, there's this voltage app right here, and I'm going to take A to station and B to start. And now as I change the voltages here, it's actually going to rotate start or station, and then it's going to rotate start. So if I turn up the volume a little bit here and just listen to what this kind of sounds like, let me click reset. We're back at the beginning. So at 0, it's the beginning of the audio file, of course. And then as I rotate up the voltage, as soon as I get to about 1/3 of a volt, it seems to jump to the next segment of the WAV file.
The first artificial Earth satellite in the world has now been...
The poor old lousy old Earth.
So what we're doing is we're just kind of scanning through the first audio file on this station in this bank. My mother's father's mother's father's mother's mother's father. I gotta figure out who this guy is.
My mother's fathers, my father's fathers' fathers, and my mother's mothers, and other people's fathers and mothers.
Song for sadists without a place to sit down.
So this is Charles Bukowski in the year of my birth, 1963, reading this very interesting poem.
Old stale bitch, the evergreen leaves, showers of broccoli love.
This was the thing I was listening to entranced the first time I unpacked this module. I was just listening to this.
Pachavi, save me. Thunder, elephant, moth of everything.
I have no idea what he's saying.
Sink and stink.
Throughout the first half of my last 52 years of severe reorientation of my life pattern,
so the next thing I can show is the second part of this, and that is sending voltage to the start knob through the second voltage. I'm going to just jack this up.
Provide the critically needed material, tools, and monies to carry on the work. My friends and family My wife's family.
And then in order to
friends would
actually
say,
restart
"I
something
was
at the
being
position of start, you
stubbornly
do have to
precious
send
to
in
my
a trigger.
daughter, not
So I'm just going to
attempting
click
to
the trigger
live
button down here below.
in which I determined to give up forever.
We'll click it again.
In which I determined
We'll
to
click
give
it again.
up forever. In which I determined
So
to give
at
up
0.16
forever.
volts,
The idea of
that's the
living
position of that wave
my
file.
family and self, how depending
Jump it up a little
entirely
bit.
Family and self, how depending entirely family and self,
So you can see.
how depending entirely on ecological.
Let's go to half a volt.
My wife's family and friends would say, my wife's family.
So you kind of see what's going on. I don't know if you can see this, the trigger blinking here, blinking green. That's me resetting.
Would say, I was being stubbornly treacherous to my wife and daughter, not attempting to earn
So if we go to a volt, let's go to a whole volt.
I languish, and things would go wrong until for the one reason or another, languish, and things would go wrong until.
So you kind of get the idea what's going on here. You can you could use voltage to pick a station, and then use voltage again to pick a starting point in that wave file, and then you can send a trigger to reset it to get that wave file to play at that position. The only thing is, it is mono. So here it's only one mono output, so I can't get beautiful stereo sounds in here, but I can feed this into a lovely reverb.
Turning green every year, a week before the others, and the pastures red with uneaten sheep's placentas, and the long summer days, and the new mown hay, and the first fires, and the hooves on the road, and the consumptive postman whistling the roses are blooming in Picardy, and the standard oil lamp, and of course the snow.
That is pretty much the entire summary of how I plan to use radio music, and I don't know that I need to go into any more. I think this is all that I wanted to do, was just kind of show precise voltage and how to use it, and it's going to be kind of fun. What I'd really like to eventually do is get my own wave files in here and come up with my own sound samples. All right, so I'll just end this on this interesting little piece of audio by Charles Bukowski, Song for Sadists Without a Place to Sit Down.
Positively grieve no more, ultimo, part chili, part glassy, hold still, bitch, the evergreen leaves, showers of broccoli love, heaving like a rabbit in a wolf's mouth, you play my flute, broccoli, Pachavi, save me, thunder, elephant moth of everything I sink and stink and saliva, Domino, Estes, Volgamo, Tourist, Pissimo, Shitimo,
Okay, thank you, Charles. All right, so that is it for Music Thing Modular's radio music module. Coming up next, the Doepfer A198 TRC, or Troutonium Ribbon Controller. Stay tuned for that.